Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Infosys Knowledge Institute guest lecture series. My name is Ramachandran. Today's session focuses on storytelling in the business context with a creative flavor. It is a privilege to have Mr. Raja with us. Welcome, Mr. Raja. A quick introduction about him. Raja is an independent organizational development consultant from 1985 with multidimensional talent. He has worked with diverse businesses as an advisor, consultant, coach, mentor, trainer, and visiting faculty. As a consultant, he has been a guide and advisor to CEOs and HR heads of corporates across sectors. His unique strength lies in his conceptual frameworks and original models, which bring in clarity and positivity to enhance organizational effectiveness. As a sought after motivational speaker, he continues to energize students, corporate teams, public social service organizations, and institutional audience. His focus is on corporate issues, youth leadership, individual and social transformation, and living positively. Raja is a very popular speaker in entrepreneurs forums. On the creative side, Raja has acted in films, popularly known as Kitty. He is a respected character artist in Indian cinema. He has co-authored a book, Rajini's Panchatantra, and blogs on Living Life Unlimited. His book is available on Amazon. I can keep talking about Raja's accomplishments, but I'll stop there. Please use the chat tool to ask any questions you have. I'll consolidate them and ask him at the end of the presentation. So with that, I welcome Mr. Raja to this Infosys session. I'll hand over the mic to our guest. Over to you, Mr. Raja. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Ram, for this introduction and also for this opportunity to share some ideas, some perspectives with our people in Infosys. Good morning to all the people who could be connecting from US and overseas, and good evening to the people in India. So I want to share with you something that happened on a flight from Bangalore to Chennai. This was February 2012. I remember that. As I was a bit delayed in reaching the airport, so I actually panicked a little bit and I rushed to the counter of Jet Airways. And the counter person smiled and said, "Don't worry, we still have another 10 minutes." So I told her, but I thought I was almost late. And then she said, "No, we are waiting for Mr. Rajinikanth." Now, Rajinikanth is a name I'm sure all of you know. I said, "Oh, that's interesting. That's going to be a nice trip for me because he has been a co-artist. I worked with him in 5 films. And he's a person who I cherish his friendship and his relationship." So lo and behold, we were in the flight together. And there was a bonus besides the executive class seat that I had. So we chatted about life. And one of the things that I love about Rajinikanth sir, is that he has this utter down-to-earthness, about his perspectives of life, his outlook about many things. So we generally talked about, the way people look at life, the way people look at challenges, the way people look at hopes, the way people look at, kind of their own, kind of strengths and weaknesses. So he made a couple of observations. One of the observations that he made was very, very self-effacive statement. He said, "Kitty sir," because Kitty is the name by which many people in the film industry call me. So he said, "Kitty sir, if this Rajinikanth from a bus conductor can become a superstar of this kind, I believe that anybody can become anything that they really want to." That was a wow statement. Here is a man considered to be a superstar of the Indian screen, whose power of influence on the public is incomparable, probably across the globe. And he's talking about his life. And he says, if I can be transformed from being a bus conductor in Bangalore into this superstar in my life, I believe that anybody can achieve anything that they want to in their life. And I said, wow, hats off to him. And as he continued, he made one more statement. And for those people who know Indian films, and especially Tamil films, you must be aware of punch dialogues, okay? The punch dialogue is that one dialogue or two dialogues in a film which is given out by the hero or the lead character or the heroine, and which has got a tremendous amount of impact and influence in the audience mind. It's like giving a philosophy in just about a sentence or two sentences. And here was Rajni sir's punchline. So he said, I don't understand why people unnecessarily complicate their life. After all, what do you require in life? And now comes the punch dialogue. And he said, Kitty sir, after all, what you require in life? A body which is useful and a mind which is peaceful. And he repeated, a body which is useful and a mind which is peaceful. And I said, wow, this is the best punch dialogue that has ever come from him, which has not appeared in any particular film. And this experience of traveling with Rajinikanth and this hearing of that punch dialogue from him became one of my very interesting favorite stories in most of my motivational talks. And every time I would talk about it, believe me, almost the whole of audience would either, break into huge applause. And you can see a lot of people standing up and saying, pumping the air and saying, hey, Talaiva. This is the impact of storytelling. My friends, let me come to this aspect of storytelling from a very different perspective, because most of the time, when you look at storytelling, it gets associated with the corporate organizations in terms of their business pursuits, influencing the storytelling related to customer mind, brand building, marketing strategy, organizational communication, public relations, many of those things. But today I want to talk about something which is the other side. I want to talk about storytelling in communicating within the organization. Storytelling as a responsibility and an advantage of the leadership in the organization. And for that, there are two definitions that I'd like to share with you first before I go into the subject. The first definition is customers. I do believe that we must have very interesting stories to tell our customers so that they can connect to our organization, they can connect to our products, they can connect to our services. But I think we also need to have a good definition of customers. I would say that we need to respect internal customers as much as we respect the external customers. The definition of customers is very beautiful. It comes from the original word custom. And when we say it's a custom in our family, it's a custom in our community, it's a custom in our region, what are we really talking about? By definition, a custom represents repeated, regular, ongoing practices and beliefs, of course, with a good intent, which is practiced either by a family or by a community. So when there is this belief or this practice with a very positive intent, then you call it as a custom. Let me take a simple example. For those people who are Indians, and especially South Indians, you would understand this. Many South Indian households have the custom of putting a small kolam, or let's say a rangoli, outside the house every morning. And that's a custom because it has got a positive intent behind. The indication of a rangoli or a kolam outside a house means that everything about that house is fine and the house is welcoming, let's say, welfare, well-being, positivity. All these are the indicators of that. So a practice with a belief that this practice is a symbolic exercise about welcoming positivity. So again, going back to the definition, a custom is one where you hold the belief or a practice with a positive intent. And this becomes a repeated, regular, ongoing belief and practice. That is when it becomes a custom. It's not a once-off kind of an event. So we have a nice definition of custom. Just add these two letters ER to that custom, it becomes customer. A customer for us is one with whom we have repeated, regular, ongoing interactions and influences with a positive intent. Let's get this beautiful definition in place. A customer is not a buyer. The first time when he comes to you, maybe he's a tentative buyer. It is up to us to convert him into a customer, which means he becomes repeated, regular, ongoing kind of entity with us. Or he has ongoing, continuing positive memories and relationships about us. Now, my dear friends, ask this question in our life: who are the people with whom we have repeated, regular, ongoing interactions? Maybe about 5% or 10% of the organization at best could be having interactions with the external customer. But most of us, all of us almost, with operational responsibilities, technology responsibilities, human resource responsibilities, financial responsibilities, research and development responsibilities, we are dealing with people within the organization day in and day out. Repeated, regular, ongoing interactions and influences with each other. Therefore, they deserve and befit this beautiful definition of customers. And this is a bit of a wake-up call, my dear friends. The challenge, especially with my consulting work largely being in India, one of the challenges that I've found is most organizations, or in most organizations, people have a tremendously higher value for the external revenue paying customer and comparatively a lesser value and respect for the internal non-paying but service providing customer. And I think this perspective has to change. And I think storytelling is a very important part of that. The reason is competency can take an organization to a particular level, but I think we need to build culture along with competency. Most of the organizations have a very high focus on competency because competency in some way is more definable, more clearly evaluatable, more clearly accessible, therefore more clearly demandable. And because it goes with a whole lot of framework related to skills, knowledge, and some attitudes, it's also possible to define standards and then expect that out of people. But culture is a mind thing. Culture is about the heart part of it, not so much the intellect part of it. So I would say that if you want to have the heart of the people, along with their minds and their competencies, what organizations need to do is to work a lot in the area of culture. Storytelling is a phenomenal tool for us to build the organizational culture. So having stated this, let me come with a few references related to culture and storytelling. I think in the organization, people have these two important components. One I call as the evaluation component, and the other one I call as the engagement component. The evaluation component becomes easier to put into practice because you can define standards and you can say, yeah, this is what is required. This is the percentage required. But how does one really look at engagement standards? We need to look at this terminology, engagement, slightly closely to understand the power of storytelling. Where do you use this terminology called engagement? Let's take a very simple, normal usage of the word engagement. It happens in relationships. Two people are seeing each other. Then there's a stage when they get engaged. And of course, normally it proceeds with a further event called a marriage. So you have this engagement. What is engagement all about? It only simply means that at that point of time, from being two different entities, there is a common entity called they are a couple now, they are a pair now, and they're eligible to walk the pathway of a marriage or whatever that they choose to after that. So from the duality of existence, there is a singularity of existence as a couple, which gets authorized, accepted, licensed, whatever. And that phenomena, you call it as engagement. You go to a technical part and ask this question, what is the engagement of a gear? It really talks about two different things, metal, material, whatever. Or it could be, two wheels locking with each other. From separation, coming together is engagement. My dear friends, we need to recognize this same phenomena. When we want to talk about engagement of people in the organization, it is about their emotional connecting with the organization. It is their emotional connecting with the purpose of the organization, with the vision of the organization, with the core values and the culture of the organization. And I think this is a huge responsibility of managers and leaders in the organization. And that's where storytelling plays a huge kind of role. So let's look at this phenomena of storytelling. Why is storytelling such an interesting, kind of thing? Let me share a few thoughts about that. Stories. What are stories about? It's all about a drama called life. And many native cultures use stories as a vehicle of retaining human values or even reminding human values. You could hear about very different cultures using this form of value propagation. Probably you'd have heard about very interesting native stories of the native Indians, the Red Indians. In Bharat, in India, we have had this as a tradition for thousands of years. The whole system of Upanyas, as you would hear it in the north, or Harikatha, as you would hear it in south, Kathakali, as you would hear it in Kerala, or Kadagalakshevam, as you would hear it in Tamil Nadu. A whole lot of labels. For example, you have the Yakshagana, which you have in Andhra typically. Every one of those regions and cultures had a form of storytelling to propagate values. And you could also talk about the grandma stories. In Tamil, we used to call them as Party Kadaigal. Party represents the grandma. And what would typically happen? There will be a narration of a story. It could be an epic. It could be a historical thing. It could be related to scriptures. But in the storytelling, essentially, some ideal values, some very ideal cherished principles would be brought into life. And that was a very beautiful way, generations after generations, the right, if I can use the virtues of life, got glorified. What was right and wrong for a man to practice got internalized. And somewhere that became the foundation of culture, that became the foundation of some kind of a spiritual guidance, that became the foundation for community to have common values and belief systems. So if that be so, what would be, for example, one second. What is the kind of connect that stories created? You typically look at a story. In the story, you have the hero and the villain. Large part of the story of that kind would be the hero having to undergo certain challenges. And as he undergoes the challenges and he braves through that, fights through that, struggles through that, the listener of the story also moves through the same experiences emotionally. And then there is this hope that, things work out for the hero. So the story is full of many barriers, unpredictability, uncertainty, doubts, tensions, apprehensions, danger, a potential failure, anxiety, ignorance, a whole lot of things. And then, this is what happens when you or I sit in a film theater and watch a movie. What happens to the hero? He's a hero because he has the odds against him. And the odds against him could be the villain, it could be a situation, it could be a task, it could be anything, but the hero is up against a wall. And then finally, the climax builds up, and then he achieves the impossible or almost the impossible. Finally, the good prevails over the bad. Finally, the villain is vanquished, whatever. But it's about the goodness prevailing over and the goodness finding a way of getting recognized. And I think it's a phenomenal thing. If this has been the pattern, for example, I come from the entertainment industry. If you look at the whole, scripting of films across the world, there are some very interesting kind of indicators. In terms of principles of storytelling, they say there are only fundamentally 7 types of scripts in the whole world. And all the stories that get generated, they get worked out, are combinations of these 7 plot types that you have. And then, you mix and match, and you can have newer and newer kind of a thing. So if this is the power of story, there's something more for us to look at. Leadership, I would say, L, is all about showing a pathway. Leadership is all about creating a possibility. And why would organization leaders need this storytelling? They would require this because a lot of times they have a need to share an organizational value. They got to implant those seeds of culture in the organization. What are our core beliefs? What do we stand by? One of the biggest respect that I have for Infosys as an organization are your definitions of your values and operating principles. So also most of the professionally good standing organization, professionally respected organizations, they have this set of values and operating principles. So when we share these values and principles, a lot of times what makes sense to the people in that organization are stories that are told. Let me share a very beautiful story right at this point of time. And I'm going to be talking about an entrepreneur who started his life in terms of working life at the age of 15. He came from a native district in southern Tamil Nadu, a reasonably below middle class. When I say below middle class, economically not so great, a bit of a struggle was there for the family. The gentleman was not very, very keen about studies. The family had a bit of land, a bit of farming, but it was a struggle to sustain. And there were 5 members in the family. So he, as the elder person, decided that I need to go and seek work. And I need to go to a city and find some kind of work. So this young man, at the age of about 15 or 16, having failed his 9th grade in the school, with the best wishes of his family, his dad and mom decided to come to the big city of Chennai, Madras, and start his life. So we have these provision stores, the typical provision stores in India. In Tamil, it's called Maligai Kadai. The provision store are grocery shops of the small traders. And those grocery shops are run by a single entrepreneur. And normally they have 1 or 2 helpers in the shop. So this young man from the village, our hero of the story, he comes to the city and gets employed as an assistant in that shop, which means he packs up the stuff over there and hands over. And I'm talking about the early 70s, okay? And he comes there and he starts his life. And in those good old days, he begins with a monthly salary of something like 20 rupees, okay? And I think 20 rupees is less than 1/3 of a dollar. That's his monthly salary. But his heart is, kind of really heavy. Such a loving family, such a pleasant atmosphere of home. However, the difficulty was there was a lot of love and affection. So he is carrying the feelings of home. And he receives, in those good old days, a letter from his dad. Dad, a very simple person, but an extremely principled person. So when this gentleman was narrating his story to me, in terms of the principled centeredness of his dad, he mentioned that his dad, whenever there would be a feast in the neighborhood, he will avoid coming home, avoid coming into the village during the daytime, because he had a mental resistance of even accepting a free food that is offered as a part of a celebration. He thought his pride was, kind of a little beyond that. I don't want to eat freely in somebody's place. So he believed in hard work, he believed in pride, and he believed in the virtue of virtues. All right, so that was his dad. So after about a month or month and a half in the city of Chennai, this young man is working hard and he received this letter. And we used to have what is called as the inland letter. My dear friends, do you remember the yellowish card inland letter? It would be all of double the size of this, and that's about it, okay? And you will have 1.5 pages to write, because half of a page would be for writing the address and all the details. So in this letter, in beautiful little letters, his dad has written him a message. And this is the first letter he's receiving from the dad. Let's call our friend, let's say Raja, for the sake of ease of conversation. So Raja receives this letter and he reads, and he's choked. The dad writes, "My dear son, I know you must be feeling a lot having gone away from the family. We feel the same here. It's likewise here. We have a very heavy heart of being away from you. However, in the interest of the family and in the interest of achieving something big in life, you're gone. I want to share with you just 3 advices. Advice number one, he says, you're gone to a city not just for getting a job. I want to remind you, you got to become a man who will provide jobs. Keep this in mind. So the first part of what he's saying is such a beautiful message, motivational message. You're gone to a city to do a job, but remember you're gone there to become a person who can provide jobs. And then comes the second very beautiful thing. And this is something that most of the people with native, knowledge would understand, but I'll explain. He says the second point, my dear son, please remember that you're gone there for hard work. So my advice to you is eat stomach full only 2 times a day, not 3 times a day. If you eat stomach full 3 times a day, maybe you'll feel very, very comfortable, a bit lazy, and the hard work that you want to pursue may not happen. Don't even give space to that. Make sure that you're disciplined to eat full stomach only 2 times a day. Rendu vela mattume saapidu in Tamil. And then the third one, I get goosebumps even when I think about it. And then the dad says, my dear son, one last but strong advice. You're going to be working in a place where the property, the material, the groceries, everything is not yours, but of the owner. You are just a help over there. You are just an assistant. Do not look at any of the material or the money or the stuff lying around there with the wrong eye. You know what he means by wrong eye? With a wrong idea. Don't feel greedy. Don't feel jealous. Don't aspire for what is not yours, which means restrain yourself from any temptation. And then comes the most amazing statement. And he adds, but my dear son, because of an unfortunate whatever sweep of your heart, or because of a temporary losing of your balance, suppose you choose to commit a mistake of becoming greedy, picking up something which is not yours. I want to make it very clear to you what you should do. If you indulge in any of that, which I consider to be wrong, please find out whichever is the nearest railway station, go jump in front of an oncoming train, and please kill yourself. Don't come back home. I would rather live with the idea that a son who was not principled does not exist anymore than to carry the burden of shame in my life. Believe that virtues are more important than other values of life. This is a narrated story, and every time I even remember this, something happens inside. And this gentleman today runs a 4,500 crore organization in the field of food business. And every time I meet him, he has some interesting anecdote of life to talk about. His stories are communicated in the organization. And believe me, in this organization where I work as a consultant, I find a lot of inspiration coming into people whenever they hear about the MD's stories. They call him the Periyar or the big man. They refer to him as the big man, Periyar. And they say that his life, his every phase of life is full of such very interesting, stimulating, highly impressive, inspiring stories. So, my dear friends, leadership has this responsibility of sharing a value which gets imprinted in the minds of people. The second thing is, it sows a seed of hope in people. Yes, a lot of times the audience, the population is looking for some ray of hope. I typically remember this organization, a software company, very much headquartered in the headquarters of Infosys, Bangalore, and I was consulting for them. And I'm talking about the period of 9/11, about 5-6 months after that, when you know that in many organizations across the globe, there was this panic, there was this economic impact, and there was this financial crunch, XYZ, a whole lot of things happening. And the question came up, what do we do? What do we do? And for many organizations, for the first answer was cut costs. And what does cut costs mean? For many organizations, the answer was cut people. That's it. So this is a very beautiful incident, and I would cherish it for my life. And I respect that chief executive so much. So there was this decision to be taken. Obviously, the popular and the most well-known and the easiest thing as it came, because many organizations were doing it without a thought anyway, of cutting people. And therefore, the whole question was, how do we decide about laying off people? What kind of, do we follow the purchase department first in, first out? Or do we look at a criticality of skills of people? Or do we look at longevity of people? Or do we look at grades of people? So the whole question was about these, but there was no much of debate about what needs to be done. So here was this beautiful meeting, heads of the departments, about 14 of them sitting, and the CEO, very pensive, very reflective, and sitting and asking this question. I would like to hear from each one individually. What do you think that we should be doing? And so from person number 1, person number 2, 3, 4, 5, and the narration takes place. And of course, almost all the narrations, other than very few, are talking about the way in which we need to lay off people. Now, as they completed, the CEO, deeply receiving everything, reflecting, he said, okay, I want to take the position of one of these employees that we want to lay off. And assume that it is the same setting and this employee has been invited into this forum and I have come in. I'm that employee to be laid off. And I want to ask you a single question. And if any one of you can answer, I'll be happy. They said, yeah, go ahead. He said, sir, I would like to ask you this question. You want to lay me off? Okay. Can you tell me in what way did I contribute to the situation that you are in today, that you think that I should be spared from the organization for what has happened? In what way have I contributed to your organization encountering the current situation? Any one of you can answer. He looks around, he waits for a minute, and then he asks, nobody has an answer? Nobody has an answer. He says, now please tell me as my colleagues, how morally are we right that we inflict a pain on a person or a set of people who have made no contribution to the creating of a pain in an organization? You know what the organization decided? Not a single employee would be laid off. Voluntarily, they all accepted pay cut ranging from 5% up to 40%, and not one soul went out of the organization. An amazing, amazing story of how hope was held on in the organization. And I think he built up such a phenomenal, not just respect, affection from the employee population, because the story went outside. You know, the rest of the managers, they felt so good in talking about the care, the empathy that the CEO had. And you can have storytelling in terms of supporting a needy heart. When I talk about this, about a needy heart, it can happen in group situations, it can happen in individual situations. And as we talk about this, there is one interesting thing that I find about storytelling itself. When do team members develop a very special connect and affection, or let's say connect and link with, let's say, team leaders? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about when do you really become softer and comfortable with a person at a hierarchy, higher level, a more important authority? Have you ever thought about when have you had a very strong, emotional, strong connect, let's say with your dad or somebody very senior in your family? If you very closely analyze, you may find something very interesting. I'll tell you, when it has happened to me in my life, and a lot of times it has happened to me in my life, when I've seen a soft part or a vulnerability of my dad, I think my connect with my dad became immensely more powerful. I still remember Prakash Badami, who was a general manager of Welcome Group Chola Hotel, where I was a personal manager. And he was a college level boxer. He was tough physically and he was tough mentally. So he would walk like this, chest out. So he was a strong man. And I remember the time when my heart actually melted because lo and behold, one day morning, I got a call and he had an apartment in the hotel complex. And I got a call at about 9:30 in the morning saying, "Hey, Krish, can you come out to my apartment?" And I walk into his apartment. Oh my God. And he's flat on the ground. He has had a slip disc and he's just not able to move. And for the first time, I saw the all powerful, almost Bhima kind of Prakash Badami out there on the floor. And believe me, something else happened. I said, "Sir, what is it that I can do?" And he said, "Krish, to kuch nahi kar sakta hai yaar. Ye to mera naseeb hai." He says, "You can't do anything about it. It's my fate." And I just realized that I got to be in this. I don't know for how long. You know, in those moments, and why I'm talking about this is leaders sometimes need to share stories of vulnerability. And then there's something else that happens in terms of connect. Something very beautiful happens. People are able to level up. And I think in organization, when we talk about team building is about leveling up. One very important aspect, he's as human as we are. I think storytelling becomes such an important, beautiful part of such leveling up in organizations. We can use stories for sending a strong message. And for this, I think we have stories from within the organization, from outside the organization. One of the stories about consistency, two of the stories about consistency I love to talk about are from the sports field. One of them I would remember, and I will share. This is about Sachin Tendulkar. It's not even a story. It's a piece from Sachin Tendulkar. So people ask Sachin Tendulkar, what makes you such a great batsman? And how do you plan, when you get onto the pitch, when you get onto the field, how do you get ready to bat? And I believe Sachin Tendulkar gives this answer, saying that whether it's a test match or a one-dayer, or it's the Gymkhana match, or whether it's a practice, every time I get on there, I go with this sense that this ball that is going to be bowled at me is the most important ball. And I got to deal with it with all the due respect that it deserves. I deal with every ball for its merit, and I deal with it completely with focus and attention. This is the power of, somebody like Sachin Tendulkar talking about focus and attention. Yet another story that I've known about is the very famous Tyson story. I don't know whether you have heard about this story. And this is about dedication and practice. So somebody said, "Wow, this is very unfair. I paid for the whole finals of this world boxing title match. And this guy comes and does swoosh. And the opponent has gone onto the floor within the first round, within the first 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, he collects 30 million and walks away. Unfair." Okay, so somebody put out a mic in front of Mike Tyson and said, "Somebody feels very unfair that you come in and within 2 minutes you do a swish, wow, with your left. And with that, he goes on the floor sliding. And that's a knockout. You make 30 million, man, with one swoosh and within 2 seconds, in 2 minutes time." So Tyson looks at him and says, "You, buddy, you saw only the swoosh, but you didn't see the 10,000 times I practiced that swoosh to become what I've become." So that is a story about practice. Sending a strong message. I think in organizations, we need to send messages to people about not only what we value, but about our systems, about our processes, about the need for discipline. And I think when we want to send a message, I think they become so much more powerful when there's a beautiful story that goes along with that. I think there are times when in an organization, the leadership has got to sensitize. And when we talk about sensitizing our heart, I'm talking about at any level of the organization. Now, one of the most beautiful stories that that has sensitized the heart of not hundreds of thousands of employees is a story And I would even dare to name the organization because it's a matter of pride. The organization, just about last month, Ram, won an award from the HBR Academy, I think, for HR practices about building culture in the organization. So I was working with this organization and it was related to promoting the organizational values and culture. That was a beautiful exercise that we did. And here is a beautiful story that came from Ram Galla, the founder chairman of the organization. So here is the story. Mr. Ram Galla was in the US for almost about 20 plus years at that point of time in 1984. And he was an academician and he was a consultant. He had no idea of entrepreneurship at all. And in 1984, there was a World Telugu Congress, which was being conducted in the US, for which he was given some responsibilities. As a part of the responsibilities, Mr. Ram Galla did some research about India and about Andhra. And then something else happened within his mind. He picked up this feeling that, hey, what am I doing in a foreign country? There is so much of potential, there is so much of a possibility, and there's so much of a need in my native country. I think I should go back and do something over there. I think for the next few months, his complete preoccupation was about getting back to India and setting up an enterprise over there. And he had this one very interesting commitment. He said, I want to go and set up an enterprise where this migration from rural areas into the urban areas can be reduced. I think our villages, our rural areas are suffering because there are huge migrations happening into the cities. And our rural culture, our rural atmosphere, our rural ethos, everything is crumbling. I need to set up an enterprise in a different kind of way. So cut back to the coming to India. And as he planned, people asked him, so you're going back to India? He said, yes, I'm going back. And what are you planning to do? He said, I'm planning to set up an enterprise. And where are you setting up the enterprise? He said, I'm setting up an enterprise in Tirupati. They said, what? I'm setting up an enterprise in Tirupati. Tirupati, that's supposed to be a pilgrimage place. He said, yeah. And then other than the pilgrimage temple and all, it's all about many villages and rural atmosphere. He said, yeah. They said, why would you choose to put up an industry over there? Even if you want to go back to India and you want to set up an industry, you should be choosing Hyderabad, or you could be choosing Visakhapatnam. Why would you go to Tirupati? So Mr. Ram Galla says with a smile, if I got to choose the best place for an economic decision, enterprise decision related to setting up an industry with profit motive as the only motive, I would set it up in Chicago because I can do a much better industry in US more than in India. But I'm going there to set up not just an industry. I'm going there to set up a belief system and a culture that we must have a lessening of rural migration into the urban population by creating entrepreneurship opportunities, job opportunities, work opportunities for the educated youth in the rural areas of India. That's my commitment, and that's what I would do. And he came back and set up, with tremendous amount of pain and effort, the Amar Raja Industries, first in Tirupati. And you know, the rest is history now. Today, it's almost a 10,000 crore organization with phenomenal kind of flow of success with itself. Sensitizing the heart for commitment. So in Amar Raja, there was this complete what you call as a culture festival and the publication of this beautiful book about the Amar Raja way. And this book opened with this story about his decision to be an entrepreneur. And I can tell you what a tremendous impact in the hearts of the people in the organization. My dear friends, this is about stories. What does story give to people? Stories give hope. Somewhere the individual sees himself over there. I can be him. I recognize. I can relook at myself. It leads to empathy. It leads to inspiration. It leads to challenging oneself. I think that's what people pick up. It leads to tremendous alignment. It leads to discovery of things from within. I think that's the power of stories that we can. So I'm not so much caught up with what I call as the methods. I think today technology-wise, you guys are kind of amazing whiz kids as far as technology is concerned. Whether it's social media as a platform, whether it's using a particular kind of art and a particular kind of craft to create material and stuff. I think all that is fine. But I would always say the what of the story is so much more important than how of the delivery of the story. I'll repeat this again. The what of the story, the substance of the story, in terms of its being touching and winning the heart, is so much more important than all the jazz that goes up. I don't want to oversimplify, but you also heard things like cock and bull story and spinning a yarn, right? I don't think we should ever get into that. I think it should be sincere. And I would say the following 4 or 5 qualities are very important in storytelling. The first one is simplicity. Can you use a language and can you use a way in which it makes sense to the audience that it needs to reach? For example, my Rajinikanth stories reaches every level of the organization, from the top to the bottom, to the contract workers. And you can see whistling happening out there when I narrate the story. Simplicity. I think the second one is sincerity. A lot of times put on stories don't make an impact. Is the story coming from your heart is as much of a question. Even if it's not your own story, have you felt for that story? It's a very important part. The third thing is what I call as the sensitivity. When you are with a story, ideally, let go of judgments and evaluations. I think that's very important. Because lo and behold, you could have a person in the organization who could be receiving the wrong end of that sensitivity. All right. Therefore, sometimes even the language, the words need to be appropriate in terms of a story narration. I've seen that sometimes unintended identities, unintended kind of labels come through stories, and that can be more of a put off than impacting. Hey guys, there is something that I want to really talk about, which is the subjectivity. Remember, a story is being received by a heart and a mind, and it can have its own interpretation. So it's a subjective reality at one level. Celebrate subjectivity. At times, allow people to make their interpretations of stories perfectly okay. And suppose they come back and say, is this what you meant about that? And if there's a slightly different interpretation, go along with that, walk along with them, make them understand. Don't say, no, I don't think you have understood. I think that kind of cuts off people. Allow subjectivity. People make their own sense. Like it happens to you and me when we watch a film. Somebody likes Dangal for a particular aspect. Somebody likes Dangal for a completely different aspect. Somebody likes, let's say, a Rajinikanth film for his style. Somebody else likes it for, let's say, a socio-political message. There is a subjectivity in receiving of stories. Allow that to happen. And like I said earlier, it's all about being human. I think that's a beautiful thing. What do I mean by being human? What happens is we are all simultaneously role holders, therefore into boxes, and then human beings outside the boxes. Being human is to be beyond all roles. It is the same human being into the role of this consultant, this current web narrator, into this actor, into this motivational speaker, into this social activities. It is the same human being. And then when it's the human being who's connecting, believe me, we need to dilute the boundaries of the roles. All right? If you hold on to the roles very strongly, I think it creates unnecessary barriers for the story to really reach people. So you can do that, and you can use stories by diluting the boundaries and the rigidness of the roles, and therefore use body language, use reaching out, use walking into, using touch, gestures, everything that can make the story melt the boundaries of roles. I think it makes such a huge difference. And use as many contexts as possible. You can use it in collective settings. You could use it in counseling. You could use it in coaching and mentoring. I remember, especially in coaching and mentoring, so I do a fair amount of leadership coaching. And this is a beautiful stuff that I must share about out there right on the top. Here was this person, a very senior leader in the organization, into the business development, into sales, rock star as far as the sales were concerned. Rock star. if you see his track record spread over about 16 years, he has delivered every time and much better than others. But there was something very interesting. The impact and influence that he created on the sales front into the market out there, that was phenomenal. But the impact that he made on people within the organization was very, very challenging. He could never build teams. He could never build a number two. He was known for his absolute roughshodness. And therefore, this opportunity came in terms of a coaching session. And I picked up a few things. Then I shared with him one very important story, a simple story. I talked about what happened to me with my son, Arvind. Arvind, I think he was about 16, and he had got his first bike. He wanted a two-wheeler. He was going to the Vivekananda College, and I had got him a bike. But of course, as I got him a bike, I was also slightly concerned, saying that this youngster should be very careful. He should, not be indifferent about where he keeps the key and things of that kind. He should park it in the right place. He should wear a helmet and a whole lot of things. All right. About 2 months after he's got a new bike, I get a panic call in my consulting office in Alwarpet. And the call is from my wife. She says, come home fast. I said, what happened? Come home fast. I said, what happened? She says, Arvind has lost the bike. Cut to home. Right through as I'm driving back home, it's all, kind of boiling inside. I thought as much. I knew that he had to be a lot more careful. I knew that something like this can possibly happen. Youngsters of today, they are not disciplined. I know a whole lot of scripts and messages going. I reach home, and when I reach home, and she narrates the story to me. And then as she's narrating, I ask her, where is he? She's still there where he had parked his bike at his friend's place. And then the call comes from Arvind. So I pick up the phone, and I'm already swelled inside with disappointment, maybe with a bit of an anger, a bit of saying that this is not acceptable. And he says, Dad. I said, yeah, tell me. He says, Dad, yeah, tell me. My bike is stolen. Your bike is not stolen because you don't know what has happened to it. You can say that my bike is missing. He said, yeah, Dad, my bike is missing. So what do you want me to do? Dad, now what do I do? Yeah, if you are good enough to get a bike, and if you are good enough to lose a bike, I think you should be good enough to figure out what you need to do. He says, no, Dad, I may have to lodge a police complaint. Yeah, if you're mature enough to have a bike and lose it, you'll be mature enough to go and lodge a police complaint. What's your problem? And here was me, the dad, the righteous dad, the dad who has paid the money for the bike, the dad who's a disciplinarian, a dad who knows how to, really kind of prescribe rules, bombarding out there on the other side of the phone. And then he said something which really kind of broke the wall. He said, but Dad, I'm asking you for help. And something just broke inside like a glass. I just realized the stupid, arrogant, inhuman person that I was at that moment. I said, I'm sorry, Arvind. And I kept the phone. And I did everything that was required. As I finished the story, the gentleman sitting in front of me, he had tears in his eyes. So I said, what happened? He said, this is how I talk to my children at home most of the time. And I said, not only to the children at home, something more than that. He said, I get the message. I get the message. My dear friends, stories really go into the heart. In fact, there's a beautiful song. This is by the famous singer, Jagjit Singh. It's about Pyar ka pehla khat likhne mein. In writing my first love story, it takes me a lot of time. So he talks about difficult messages to be sent, and difficult messages take more of time. Stories give us that opportunity. My dear friends, stories are all about human beings. Stories are there for us to make that human connection. Stories are there for us available to touch the emotional chords of people. Corporate organizations ultimately are human communities. Use stories creatively to make the best of impact. All the very best, and thank you so much for this wonderful time.
Thank you, Mr. Radha. That was a very inspiring speech. While others ask any questions on the chat tool, the Rajinikanth story that you shared was very, very inspiring. Also, the way you defined the customer based on the customs that we do regularly, that was again a very interesting definition, specifically the focus on internal customers. So one question personally from my side, being in Infosys and also in the technology industry, we say data is a new oil, right? There is so much of focus on data. I'm sure you would have seen both sides of it, but you spoke about the human part touching the heart. So how do you think we balance this? Because approaches like Six Sigma talk about what you measure, you cannot improve. But on the other side, there is a culture part, which is sort of intangible. So how would you answer this question on balancing the data versus the feeling part?
Such a beautiful, kind of question. So there are 4 levels at which this gathering takes place. This wisdom, this building of wisdom takes place. The first level is data. Data becomes information. Data put into a specific form to give an immediate meaningful representation is information. Data becomes information. Then information has to be converted into knowledge. Information made applicable to produce a positive impact, then it becomes knowledge. Otherwise, it's an information and data dump. So there is a transformation process from data to information, from information to knowledge. And then there is a further category from knowledge to wisdom. What is this transition from knowledge to wisdom is the key question that we need to ask. Wisdom is perspective building. And the moment we talk about perspective building, there is a need for us to hold 2 beautiful realities together. One is the objective reality, which is the world of measurement, evaluation, and the subjective reality, which is the mind and the heart, the world of subjective reality, which is about feelings, emotions. Like this objective reality of role taking in the organization comes along with a human being taking on that role and driving that role. This simultaneity has got to be recognized. And therefore, so why do we ever say congratulations? Why do we become happy in organizations? If organizations are all about not being emotional, why would we celebrate things in the organization? All right, so the whole point is, yes, for making assessments, for making measurements, for making evaluation, by all means, we need the beautiful world of objective reality, and therefore the world of evaluation, the world of data and information. But at the same time, for deep engagement requires taking away of the boundaries and standards. Engagement is the opposite of evaluation. As much as employee engagement has been talked about by organizations, a lot of times what is missed out is engagement is actually the opposite of evaluation. And what we require is not the either or, but the both and the simultaneity of the 2.
Very, very well put, sir. Very profound statements. I think we'll have to, internalize it and think about.
Sure. Anytime we can have a longer chat on that. Sure. Yeah.
So one question many people are asking is about the recording. So yes, this video is being recorded. It will definitely be shared. So there was one question. How does one create influence successfully through humanity in storytelling? So this is on the influence part. This is a question from Vishwas. Yeah, so again, in the Six Sigma approach, for example, we talk about influence without authority. So how do you use storytelling to influence successfully through humility in storytelling? Even though we are humble, how do you create that influencing part?
This is, the very phrase that you use, which is, kind of creating connect or impact without authority. I think that itself is a very beautiful, kind of a phrase that describes influencing. But I'm happy that you asked this question. And influencing also calls for a recognition of a few things. For example, one of the important things that I recognize in influencing is, what am I in control of? And when I go deeply, I recognize that 99% of the time, what I am in control of is what I can offer and not about what I can get from the other person. So then I do not consider an attempt that I'm making or an approach that I'm making as conclusive, saying that I'll try this, and if it doesn't work out, well, that's his problem. Because I realize that I'm not in control, but I'm only in a position to make an offering. So I choose to offer again. I choose to modify the offer. I choose to re-examine the way I have offered it. So I look at all those possibilities. I look at tweaking the way I have communicated, tweaking the content that I have communicated. I look at escalating to somebody and taking the help so as to create the influence. I'm willing to share my helplessness in terms of saying that, look, you know what? I'm actually finding myself at a very, very kind of a soft spot because I'm not able to make, the kind of impact that I'm wanting to make with you. Surrendering is one part of that influence. So when you talk about influence, it's not about from a position of strength alone. Some of the most beautiful touching connects happen when the connect is from vulnerability. So pick up this whole gamut of possibilities, okay? And never give that, what you may call as a target of saying, I'll try once and let me see whether it works. Recognize this beautiful factor that what we are as human beings are in control of is about what we can offer, not about what we can get. So if your idea is to get an influence of acceptance, acceptance depends on him. What you can do is to continue to create that offering of X, Y, Z, that is unlimited. Recognize that, my friend. I think there's a way.
Thank you, sir. Very interesting answer. Can we take a few more minutes? I think we have.
Comfortably, Ram, comfortably.
Yeah. So Sangeeta says, sir, we were so engrossed in listening to you. So I have to ask you this many times. We are not listening to stories. How important is listening for a leader to encourage storytelling?
I think that's the first and foremost quality required, because if you want to become a good storyteller, I would say that you must also be a person who is a very, very empathetic listener. Because what we talked about, stories are not about a script and a data or information put together. Stories are about the human element out there. And even as you're narrating a story, I think an ideal storyteller should be sensitive and connected enough to pick up from the responses, gesture, postures, smiles, seriousnesses on the face, reflections on the face, as to whether he's or she's making contact. I think it's very important to be sensitive to how it's being received. And if you're going to develop that sensitivity, you need to be a very sensitive listener. I think good storytelling, narrating skills come with very good listening skills. One, about the details of the story and part of that. Second, the emotive content of that story. And the third one, which is also beyond that, which is the contextuality. And therefore, your ability to build perspective. Let me tell you about when I say contextuality. For example, you could be narrating a story about somebody in terms of, let's say, a physical assault on somebody and a dramatic situation. By itself, an assault may look like, my God, that's wrong kind of thing. But suppose you can bring in a context of something that was violated, and the response of a person, a he or a she, was therefore an aggressive kind of a posture, and how that was relevant to that situation. You're building a context. So building context, picking up signals, whether it's something is being received with the same kind of sensitivity and intensity that you're communicating, all this call for a mind in a storyteller of an active listener. Good recipients, I believe, is very much necessary for good offering. And therefore, wonderful, be a good listener, train to be a good listener as much as you need to be a good storyteller. Good question.
Thank you, Mr. Radha. One more question I had, are there different genres, different flavors of storytelling? For example, your focus was mostly on internal customers. What about external customers? Is there any difference that you have seen when we talk about a business case or a proposal that has to be presented outside? Are there any subtle differences that you can share with us?
One of the things that I really love this with, I would even name it, with Arun Jain. All right, Arun Jain, who's the founder of Polaris, and we have had when I was consulting for Polaris, we have had some amazing. I think every quarter they used to have this customer, kind of mela kind of thing, customer visit, and a whole lot of things happening on the business development side. I've seen him, kind of coming with very, very connecting stories, which are non-business stories. It could be even stories related to, the beginning of the enterprise and the way he has kind of done it. And, which creates an immediate connect with the customers in a particular way. For example, striving of excellence. I remember this story from him about striving of excellence, and which I heard during one of those business contact presentation. He talked about how he became an entrepreneur. And he was, I think, one of the 7 siblings in the family and the only son, and the last one at that, I think something of that kind. So the whole orientation of the family was that the son should, study very well, should become an engineer, and very quickly get a job, and he had big responsibilities. So he said the whole framework of life was become an engineer, get a job, get 10,000 rupees, get a scooter, life is achieved. And he said, suddenly I realized that within 3 years of graduating, I had achieved all this. And then I looked at myself and I said, what is life all about? And I realized that we set goals for ourselves, which are far, far lesser than what we can. And I said, I am going to try something very, very different and which is extremely challenging to me, which is creating excellence in enterprising. And that is how the journey began. Now, the first time I heard this story was in a business context, which was that customer mela part of it. And therefore, in terms of pursuit of excellence, how it became an internal value, how that it became an entrepreneur's value, and how it became an organizational value. I think that was the further narration. But you can certainly have beautiful stories being narrated even in the business context. I think if we recognize at the end of it that there is no big difference between internal customers and external customers. At the end of it, there is always, as much as there is this evaluation, assessment of standards, specifications, excellence, finesse, guarantee, warranty of a product and all that, I think there is also this other part where are we really connecting to people who matter and offering things that matter to them? I think that part of the connect is extremely, extremely as emotional as it is intellectual and cerebral.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Very, very profound statements. We'll take one last question. Harry asks, what is the difference between good verbal and good written storytelling? So I'm sure you would have seen multiple media ways of telling stories. Are there any differences in the written versus the visual versus the verbal part?
The advantage of a written one is that you're doing it at your time, at your convenience, in your way, you're editing it, you're putting it all together. Your manageability is so much more. But in terms of a narrating story, it happens to what is happening right now. So here is Raja going on, and I was joking with Ram, saying that, Ram, I do not know how to do talks for less than 90 minutes. And I can go for 2 hours, I can go for 3 hours. So one is that while narrating a story, there is this factor of time, and there is factor of audience attention, which are all very much in the context, okay? So there is a managing of a context where there's a whole lot of human energy, which is not completely in your control. But a good storyteller is one who recognizes this and slowly develops, if I can use the term, mastery to still narrate a story. So in Tamil, there's a beautiful phrase called idam porul eval therindu செயல்படுதல். It means contextually becoming appropriate and relevant. And I think if one can pick up this quality, contextually becoming, so you have the time factor, you have the quantity factor, you have the quality factor, you've got the, the audience demographic and receptivity factor, all of them clued in, and you're constantly feeling and sensing how are they receiving it. I think it's a very dynamic, beautiful thing. I just love it, but it's a very dynamic, beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Raja. Since we have already overshot the time, you've given us a lot of food for thought. Thank you so much for taking your valuable time to join us today on this session. And thanks to the audience for joining us today and for coming up with their questions, for being very participative. You will find links to Mr. Raja's website in the email that we shared for this session. And to know more about the Knowledge Institute, please visit infosys.com/IKI. So with that, we will complete this session, Mr. Raja. And in spite of all the natural challenges that we had, we are very glad that we were able to pull it off. Thank you so much to you and your team for all the support, the background work that we did so that we could make this session successful. So
it has been a privilege. It has been a privilege, Ram, and thank you so much for this opportunity. And the mail ID is there, the website is there. Anyone wanting to connect, you're most welcome. It'll be absolute joy for me. My indulgence in life is to connect with people and share whatever that I can. Most welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being there today. Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a nice